To give some background information, let me first start off by saying this has left me constantly looking over my shoulder. This June, I traveled abroad with an exchange program in Japan, where I would be a host student and study at a local high school for 8 weeks. My host family had taken me to the sites in Kyoto and Osaka, but there were a few places we hadn't gone yet. On Saturday, we decided to go to a famous temple in the area, and only me and my host father went, since my host sister was at volleyball practice. My host father's hobby is photography, so he brought his DSLR camera and a bunch of lenses, so we could get the best shots possible. We arrived at the temple and there was a good mix of Japanese and gaijins. For those of you who don't know, a gaijin is a foreigner. We proceeded to buy our tickets and enter the temple. My host father whipped out his camera and started to take pictures of the landscape and candids of me as well. Pretty soon I realized people were staring at me, and I paid no attention to it, since it looked a bit strange for an American girl to be walking with a Japanese man. I brushed off the weird glances as I was captured by the temple's beauty. As I was taking pictures on my phone, an English man next to me taps my shoulder discreetly and says, "There is a man following you taking pictures of you, miss. Be careful." I laugh and tell the man that it is only my host father who is taking pictures, and the man turns ashen in the face and says, "No, not him. The man behind your host father. He has been taking pictures of you the whole time, while neither of you are looking." At this point, my heart begins to race, and I turn around to see none other than a short, chubby Asian man holding a digital camera that's pointed right at me. I act nonchalant and walk to my host father and try to explain the situation, but my Japanese is not advanced enough to give him the full story. The only thing I can muster out is shikan, pervert in Japanese, and point discreetly to the man following me. My host dad, who is a whopping 6'2" man, walks over to the creepy guy and converses with him in Japanese, and gets him to hand over the camera, then runs for his life to the temple exit. Much to my surprise, the SD card is full of pictures of only me, and they progressively get more creepy. There was even a picture that he somehow snuck from under my skirt, which I didn't even notice. We contacted the temple security and the local police, and they are investigating and promised to return with more information. Although there was no harm done to me, I feel constantly paranoid that now everyone is taking pictures of me, or that I will somehow see this man again on the train or bus, and that this time he won't settle for pictures of my skirt. I, a 25-year-old female, have been living in Japan for a few years now, and one thing I have quite often are stalker encounters. It seems that in my area, or anywhere that isn't a big city, now that I think about it, Japanese men can come to be quite obsessed with foreign women, especially fair-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreign women such as myself. I've dealt with quite a few situations where I was sure I would be kidnapped. One such encounter was back in 2013 when I was in my 3rd year of university. The following was a very brief encounter, but a terrifying one nonetheless. I was studying abroad at a school in Saitama, making a lot of friends and having the time of my life. I joined the Capella Club and had a group that I sang with. Together there were 5 of us. They were all men, which made me uncomfortable at first, but we blended well together, and they felt more comfortable singing English songs with me there to help with pronunciation and whatnot. One day after practice was finished, my group invited me to go shopping with them at a local supermarket to get things for a nabe party. For those who don't know, nabe is basically a hot pot. You get a bunch of veggies and some meat, then you put a big pot on a little portable gas burner, and everyone gathers around and eats together. It's a huge part of Japanese culture and a great way to hang out with friends. I was ecstatic that they invited me. I was usually left out of these kinds of things at first because I was an outsider, whereas they had known each other since their freshman year. Over the few months that we had been singing together though, they'd grown to be like a family to me, each one like an overprotective big brother, especially a guy named Kasuki. He was tall and a bit on the heavy side, but he was extremely charismatic. Whenever he saw me fumbling around, nervous or confused, he'd quickly appear by my side and throw a heavy arm around my shoulder, practically knocking me over while asking, "What's the problem, Taini-chan?" Anyway, the nabe party. We all went to our friend's house for the party and ended up drinking and talking until pretty late, when my phone in my pocket vibrated to tell me I had low battery. I finally saw the time and realized it was already 4 a.m. The guys were getting ready to nap until the train started back up, but I was only a 30-minute walk away from my share house. I announced that I was leaving and started packing my stuff up. Kasuki offered to walk me home, but I told him I was fine. The sun will be rising soon. Japan has an early sunrise, and it really wasn't that far. The cold would kill me before the walk did, I joked. They reluctantly agreed and saw me off, demanding I call them if anything happened. I made it to the station safely, marking the halfway point home. I descended the stairs to see a single car parked outside with a man leaning up against it, staring straight at me. It wasn't anyone I knew. He was older than me, in his mid-30s, maybe early 40s. His head turned, watching me as I walked down the stairs. Feeling uncomfortable with the unwanted attention, I rushed my pace a little, rubbing my hands together to fight the sudden chill that overcame me, though I was pretty sure it had nothing to do with the cold. I crossed to the other side of the street, avoiding him as best as I could. I avoided looking at him as well, but I heard the car door slam and the engine start up. Headlights illuminated me and he turned to drive alongside where I was walking. His window rolled down. "Hey," he said in Japanese. "Are you alone?" I said nothing. "Where are you going? Do you speak Japanese?" I quickened my pace. "You're pretty. Let's hang out." I began power walking. The sluggish tiredness from the party was quickly being replaced with adrenaline. He pulled ahead and I thought he gave up, but his car stopped not far ahead, and he put it in park, getting out. "Let's go home together." He was standing about 10 feet ahead of me. I stopped so I wasn't walking closer to him. "Let's go home together," he repeated a little more forcefully, stepping toward me. "Get in my car." I didn't have much time to think. I immediately turned left and sprinted into the park. There were only 4 entrances, all of which a car could not enter. It was a traditional Japanese-style garden with tall bamboo trees, and a pond of koi, surrounding a gazebo in the middle. The man was in a no-parking zone, so he wouldn't leave his car alone. I heard him curse under his breath and jumped back into the car. I pulled out my phone, immediately calling Kazuki. Just my luck, though. He didn't answer. I tried the rest of my group. No one answered. I looked at the next exit just in time to see his car crawl by slowly, his head sticking out the window searching for me, as I hid behind a grove of bamboo. Trembling in fear, I tried again and again with no success to reach the guys. I looked repeatedly at my 4 exits, always seeing him crawl by. He was circling the park, waiting for me to walk out so he could talk to me again, though I had a feeling talking wasn't really what he wanted to do. Just as I was about to cry, my phone lit up dimly with a phone call from Kazuki. "What's the problem, Teeny-chan?" he said jokingly. The other guys in the background were still joking around. In a rush of breath, I explained to him my current predicament, though he didn't say a word the entire time. I could practically hear the smile leave his face. The rest of the group had quieted too, and I heard one say, "What's going on? Is she okay?" He told me to stay where I was, and that he was on his way. But I was already 20 minutes away, and I wasn't sure that I had 20 minutes before the guy parked his car and came into the park to look for me. I looked behind me again just in time to see him drive by the exit slowly, looking through. That's it. I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm scared. I want to go home. I'm going to run after he passes the next exit and turns the corner, I explained. "No," he said. "Wait for me. I can run and be there soon." But Kazuki wasn't a runner. I didn't think he could get there any faster than I could. He started to say something more, but my phone suddenly went dark. Dead battery. No turning back now. I waited a few seconds and there he was, right on schedule. He crawled by the exit, then stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it, but he looked hard and slowly around. The sun was starting to come up now and he had a better view. It really was now or never. He slowly moved forward. I crept out of my hiding spot and moved toward the exit. I poked my head out and saw him turn the corner. I sprinted toward my house and didn't look back. I was too scared to. I don't know if he saw me and I was too fast to follow or what, but I didn't ever see the guy again. I immediately put my phone on the charger and called the guys back to let them know I was okay. But Kazuki never let me walk home alone in the dark again. This happened years ago when I was about 8, and my older brother was 10. My dad was stationed in Japan and this was about 3 years in, so we were very familiar with the area. So no one thinks badly of my mother, who is amazing. Crime and harm to children in particular was punished with incredible severity, so it was normally very, very safe to be out by ourselves. We decided to walk the 5 blocks off base to our favorite store to buy some new toys with our allowance. It also had a huge arcade on the very top level, about 20 floors up. We got out the base gate, across the tracks, and made our one left turn to go to the store. It's a straight shot from the gate, really. As we pass one of the first shops, I notice an Arab man in all-white traditional dress, loitering in the alleyway. He stood out not only because of his dress, but also because really anyone non-Asian stands out in that part of Japan. So we both see him but don't really think too much of it, until he steps out behind us after about half a block. We both take note, but it's not too strange, so we keep walking. Then he starts gradually catching up to us, deliberately enough that we both look at each other, and can see we are equally uncomfortable. My mother had her own past traumas, and so was always very open about the dangers children faced, and I immediately had the feeling that this guy was not right. Something was off. So seeing the look on my face, my older brother leans in and says, "Let's see if he is." And we proceed to both speed up our pace and take a right, then 2 left turns, bringing us back to our original route. If he had been going his own way, he would have never done this, but sure enough, he followed the whole way, gaining enough on us that as soon as we hit the original street and saw him turn back on it to follow, my brother yelled at me to follow him and we fucking ran our asses off. The guy shouted as soon as we took off, and the 2 times I glanced back, he was chasing at top speed. We did kiddie triathlons with my dad, and thank God we were in good condition, because we ducked through street shops, took every alley we could in the next 5 blocks to try to lose him, to no avail. Ended up booking it up 20 flights of escalators to the arcade, and then my older brother dragged me behind the biggest game we could find, up against the wall. We watched him come sprinting up the last escalator, realize he was on a floor packed with children, look around angrily, and then walk back down. Absolutely terrified. And this was before cell phones or anything, so we still had to get home. Brother for the win again hailed a cab out the front of the store with tons of people around, and made the gate guard at base call our parents to come pay for it and pick us up. Needless to say, we stayed on base for a good while after that. I reminded my brother of this, and he said what I didn't remember was that there was a black car pacing us too, and that's why he took us through so many small back alleys, to lose the car as well. That makes it way scarier that he had backup. I lived in Japan for around 10 months a couple years back, as part of a study abroad program as my placement year for university. I lived in Hiroshima, and pretty much every Japanese person I met was exactly how you would expect them. Generous and respectful. All except this one lady, who just so happened to live in the apartment next to me. It was about a month after I'd been in Japan, originally from Northern Ireland, so it was quite an adjustment to make, when our group of gaijins decided we were going to the Seijo Sake Festival. For those who don't know, this is a huge sake rice wine drinking festival that, from what I now understand, everyone goes and gets extremely drunk at. As men of fine taste and culture, we sampled many different kinds of sake from all over Japan and got rode off beyond belief. Then we all got the train home to our apartments. I can't remember shit all apart from calling my girlfriend at the time and passing out on my futon. Normal stuff. Skip to 6 a.m. the next morning when my loud as fuck doorbell wakens me up. Keep in mind my apartment is extremely small, so the noise is extremely loud. I check the time and am confused as anything, but assume it's just my friend from downstairs who wants to talk about last night. I look through the peephole in my door and see a police officer standing there. First thought that goes through my mind is, Taylor, what the fuck have you done when you were drunk last night? But at the same time, I was so sure I just fell asleep right away. I talked to the dude using a translation app and he basically tells me there's been a noise complaint. Strange, considering the fact all I did was make a phone call and fall asleep. Anyway, the guy sees how confused I am and kinda just sees there must have been a mistake and leaves. I'm honestly still drunk and just super confused, but the day carries on as normal. Next morning, 6 a.m., doorbell rings. I already kind of assumed what it was gonna be this time, and what do I see through the peephole this time? 2 police officers. Same convo goes down, and I convince them that there's been no noise. I literally walk them into my apartment to show them how I fell asleep watching Netflix. They tell me at this point it's the neighbor, who I've never met, is making the complaints. At this point I think she's just a bitch or maybe racist. I ask the guy at my uni who takes care of all the foreign students about this, and he tells me that I'm getting moved apartments to a room on the floor below. I'm pretty pissed because I just settled into my new space, but whatever. He plans on coming tomorrow morning with the landlord to move my shit out and check my new room is okay. Ever get it when you get woken up by something in the middle of the night and it really fucks you up? I went to sleep on good time that night, in prep for the people helping move my stuff out. So naturally, at 3 a.m., I'm fast asleep. Then suddenly, my doorbell is just constantly ringing. It's fucking deafening. And of course, has woken me up straight away. I can't even begin to tell you how scared I was. Couldn't even move, didn't want to. After about a minute of what felt like incessant noise, complete silence. I make my way over to the front door to look through the peephole and see nothing, but I just know it's this psycho bitch neighbor. Nothing else happens that night and I eventually get back to sleep. I wake up the next morning still kinda shaken, but it's cool because my boys are coming round soon. I keep walking out the front to check if they're downstairs, and quickly closing my door behind me, because I don't know what this woman will try if she sees me. I walk into my room and the slide door to my balcony is open, and there I see her for the first time. She literally wrapped her fucking body around the fence that separates our balconies, whilst keeping her footing on her side, and is just staring right at me. We stare at each other for a second, and then she quickly whips back around onto her side. Literally 2 seconds later, my doorbell rings, and I'm just like, nah, that's not possible. This is some demon shit. I'm so fucked. Thank God it turns out to be the people to help move my stuff, and I tell them what's up and hastily move downstairs to my new room. Outside of her turning up at my new place once, and asking if the police had came there, I was able to avoid her from then on. I guess the police decided to start ignoring her calls. So this is a creepy story involving an encounter a friend and I had in Tokyo, Japan, while living there in 2003. For those of you who have never been to Tokyo, the city is bustling and busy up until midnight. Once midnight hits, the train system shuts down, so if you're on the train at 11:59 and it's about to turn midnight, the train will go to the next stop on its track, and then everyone has to get off. You spend many nights in Tokyo planning how late you can stay out, and still get home without having to walk 3 to 4 stops distance. This night, my friend and I messed up, and ended up having to get off the Yamanote line, probably the most famous line in Tokyo, 4 stops before where we lived. Knowing only the vague direction we had to head home, east, we got off at a station at 12 o'clock, and started walking. Around the corner from the station there was a businessman in his 30s or so, based on his size and hair color, face down on the ground. Now, in Japan it is not uncommon for people to get drunk and pass out in public places, so I didn't think anything of it, and went up to him to ask him if he was okay. After asking him a few times if he was alright, he neither moved nor responded, and then I noticed that not only was he sprawled out on the ground, but his cell phone was also several feet away from his outstretched hand, as if he had just collapsed while on his phone. Not sure what to do, I looked to my friend for help. At that exact moment, a car came zooming down the narrow street and stopped at a grinding halt by us. The driver, a young Japanese guy, looked at us first, then looked at the man on the ground. He asked the man if he was alright and got no response. Then the situation hit him, and he saw me and my friend, 2 foreigners, standing over what could have been a dead man on the ground. He clearly got spooked and drove off without pushing the issue further. At that point, how strange a situation this was and how impossible it would be to explain even in English and not look like we had hurt/killed the guy. My friend and I decided to get out of there as quickly as possible, and we took off, following the tracks as best we could to get home ASAP. About 20 minutes later, near the next station, who do we run into smoking a cigarette? The guy who had pulled up in the car next to us. He seemed visibly still shaken. He glanced at me and I at him, and once he realized where he saw me from, he put his cigarette out at inhuman speed, got in his car, and sped off again. That was the last we saw of him. For years, my friend and I would randomly discuss what happened to the guy in the car, as well as if the guy in the street was actually dead or not. I wish I would have helped the guy on the ground, but I was a scared college student afraid of being in a Japanese jail. Finally, after writing this whole post out, it occurs to me that while the story is odd from my point of view, the Japanese guy in the car has a real let's not meet story on his hands. Try and think of it from his point of view. I bet in some Japanese version of the subreddit somewhere online, he is typing a story of the time I came across 2 foreigners that had murdered a man then followed me.